fantastic. This is GT Racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up top!
Oh my god! Oh. Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Six very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go!
Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
inside wall. He's gonna pass nearly 3 cars down that front straightaway, and he's gonna get them all done with. What amazing
Lead to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is gonna touch in. Pit crash sideways. What a save!
Look to the outside, and Cronkite goes off. De Jong into second place.
going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's howling down to the inside.
I trying, there's contact though.
Slide left to the racetrack. Chris Benner drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact.
He's going to try and make the move around the outside the Parabolica. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cut back here. Get the run out the Parabolica. That's beautifully done there. Makashube, there's a little bit of door banging as well.
Today is the start of a journey. A very, very long journey to the top of the sim racing tree to compete against the elite of road racing competition on the iRacing.com platform. Joshua Rogers, Sebastian Job. Is there somebody on the grid today who is going to etch their name on the trophy for the third edition of the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Supercup in 2021? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Okayama for what will officially become round number 1 of the Porsche iRacing Cup when it comes to the qualifying series into the World Championship. I'm Bo Albert, and alongside me today is the always entertaining and often baffling David Haynes. David, we kick things off tonight in this series at a track that doesn't look too incredibly difficult on paper, but to actually execute a lap around here, you need the most delicate touch on all inputs.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, that's Okayama International Circuit in Japan. Twice host of a Formula One Grand Prix. And yeah, exactly. On paper, you could probably think you could make one out of a paperclip. When it comes to actually racing here, there's a little bit of elevation change. There's some confusing corners. And what initially looks simple becomes difficult to extract perfect performance out of lap after lap. Here is where it is in the mountains. Some sweeping corners, some hairpins, and I find the toughest one to be turn 4 there, Atwood Curve, as you've got to, do you take an early apex, a late apex? It starts going uphill through the middle of the corner, and that can either break the rear loose or send you pushing wide, and you have to get out of the throttle.
Well, if there's one thing I know about turn number 4, it's that in qualifying, you absolutely have to nail it for that very long run down the back straight that then leads into an incredibly technical section with a number of hairpins. And I quite like some of the corners around this circuit, promptly named Hairpin Corner. Very creative. Love it. 10 out of 10. But right now, we are 5 minutes into qualifying. It's an 8-minute session, so 3 minutes are left on the clock, but the drivers only get 2 laps. And at the moment, it is Matthias Berg on pole position with a 1:30.0, which is a lightning fast lap around this circuit. Francisco Manuel Silva is on the front row alongside him. But for us, David, of course, being an Australian broadcaster, we're quite familiar with the Australian community, and we've got quite a good representation there as well. We've got the likes of Andrew Gilliam, Dylan Burson there as well, who just recently signed to Vendavel Sim Racing. A great move there. And Clint Smith also in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, you look up and down the entry list for this race, and it is a cracking mix of different nationalities and talents from all over the globe. There is a strong Australia NZ representation and some drivers that we are well familiar with, but you scan the club names, there's also Scandinavia on the pole, Africa, South Africa for second place, and then all manner of European, Asian club drivers. So all sorts. And I think that speaks well to the iRacing platform and how well Porsche and iRacing have done marketing this series and this racing to appeal to all sorts of people all over the world. We know Porsche Cup cars race in national and international championships on just about every continent of the globe. It's a well-known, well-loved car, and a challenge to master it can create some great racing.
Absolutely, and of course this is qualification for the World Championship, so it is a completely global spectacle, this series, and all the drivers from all over the world are looking to get themselves a slice of the pie when it comes to 200,000 US dollars. That's not up for grabs in this series, but if you can get in the top 20 in the series, and that is what we're looking for, the top 20 drivers after 5 rounds, it's going to be very, very tough to make that cut. But if you manage that, you book yourself a ticket to the big show, the biggest spectacle in iRacing.com road racing, the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, also sponsored by Vodafone as well. Great partners coming on board for that series. But at the moment, I think most of our drivers have just about finished their laps. One driver that hasn't is Tommy Tukanen, who is now working his way down the back straight, actually on lap number 3. So he is done with qualifying, but every lap of practice really does matter around here. If you are wondering about track conditions today, it's not the coolest day we've ever had here at Okayama. Of course, Japan often sees some slightly cooler temperatures, but right now we're seeing a track temp of 36 degrees, which is going to throw these drivers around just a little bit.
Yeah, you imagine it would be a beautiful sunny day, and that's really going to hurt with the traction coming out of the slow hairpins. That can be a bit of a problem point, trying to make the car grip up in second gear and sometimes even first gear potentially.
Absolutely, and that's what these drivers are about to suffer with, because we're about to get ourselves onto the grid for the standing start for our first round of this series. And getting these cars off the line is no easy feat, but the driver that is going to lead them all the way is Matthias Burke in pole position by a decent margin, it has to be said, over Francisco Manuel Silva, who joins him on the front row. Andrew Gilliam, Dylan Burse, and Clint Shane Smith are your top 5. Nicholas Skeets finds himself in the top 6. A great effort there ahead of Steve Hosey, Adam Williamson as well on the 4th row of the grid. Scott Turner and David Bosgar, your top 10.
Yeah, 11th place, Fred Montero from France. Then it's Alsdander, Central Europe in 12th. Michael Taljancic, Oz NZ in 13th. Then Shamir Eisen, Mod Hanapaya in 14th place. Jeremy Civic 15th. Jonathan Durandel 16th. Andrea Nix 17th. Matthew Doust 18th. Thomas Ponton in 19th. And Enzo Hiseta in 20th. All corners of the globe represented.
Absolutely, it's a very busy lineup. Kicking things off on the 11th row of the grid goes to Colin Hill, Adrian Duke, with Peter Johansson, Tommy Tukanen, and Lewis Gasper, your top 25 and last drivers to set a lap time in qualifying. The ever-popular Robert Plumley in position 26 ahead of Lewis Williams, Maurice Henry, Brody Santance, and Matthew Grousseau, who rounds out a 30-car field. 30 drivers, 19 laps. And it's going to be a very, very interesting run into the opening few corners. Okayama is a very technical start. It is right, it is left. All I know for sure is it is lights on, the clutch is ready to drop, and it is lights out, and away we will go. A great jump from your pole sitter immediately, trying to break away. A good start for Dylan Burse as well, trying to get a little bit of ground, but hard to do so as the drivers funnel their way through. You can see a couple of drivers checking up a little bit, everyone being super cautious. These cars, of course, very slippery when it comes to cold tires. You've really got to tiptoe around. Many getting sideways, but so far so good. One driver hits the tire wall, but for the most part, the field has done a very good job as they find their way in towards turn number 4. It's a long, long right-hander, which leads onto a very long straight. And David, this, I think, is where we're going to see a lot of passing in this race as the 8 car goes for a little bit of a spin in the background.
Yeah, my namesake there, David Bosger, had to lock them all up. But of course, down the long back straights, the highest speeds into a big braking zone in the hairpin. If you can get a pass done anywhere, it's here. But it's still not easy because drivers can defend the inside very well or go around the outside. That becomes the inside for the next corner. And off the start, everyone on the 3rd row, horrible jump. They went 4 wide, and everyone from the 4th row went and grabbed a position.
Absolutely. Right now, Andrew Gilliam is holding on to 3rd spot, but only just. Dylan Burse really applying the pressure right now as the top 2 just break away a little bit. But Dylan, look at him, every braking zone already trying to find a way past. Andrew Gilliam right now, right underneath the rear wing of the Pursuit Sim Racing Porsche, and onto the front straight there will go. If you're really brave, there are opportunities into turn number 1 here, but I'd say you have to be quite brave to make it happen. So we will sit behind just for now. And I think right now the urgency for Dylan is that it is the fact that 2.5 seconds is the gap from Andrew Gilliam to your race leader right now. So if Dylan is going to challenge for a race win today, at the moment, Andrew really is a bit of a bottleneck.
Yeah, first and second, you can see it in this shot, are starting to break away. Gilliam, indeed, the bit of the cork in the bottle for the moment, but you never quite know about tyre temperatures, about roll bar settings and such. Once the tyres warm up, Gilliam could come on very strong for the remaining laps, or maybe he was good in qualifying, but it's not going to stand up in the hot race temps. He's going to cover off third.
He is at the moment, you can see just holding the inside line, but it opens up the outside for Dylan. And it is possible to hold it around the outside there, but Dylan elects not to do so at the moment. You briefly alluded to setups there, and one of the beautiful things I think about these cars is actually the fact you can't do all that much to them. Of course, there is always time to be found in a setup. There is always adjustments you can make to make the car more comfortable to your driving style. But as a whole, these cars are fairly limited in what you're able to do. You've got your cambers, you've got your toes, ride heights, you've got your anti-roll bars as well, like you alluded to. But it is very much a spec series, and that's what gives us this really cool close racing as your leaders at the moment, Francisco Manuel Silva and Matthias Burke, go around to complete lap number 2. A good battle happening at the moment for 11th place, as Thomas Pontonen is in a big battle at the moment with Hana Pia, and they're scrapping over 11th at the moment, and we'll see how this battle goes on. But it's been a very good start for some of these drivers.
Well, some drivers always start better than others. Your biggest movers so far looks like Matthew Doust and Thomas Pointonen up in 10th and 11th. Your top 4 exactly as they qualified, but that's a big hit there in turn 1. 3 drivers involved.
Absolutely. One of them was Fred Montero, and Scott Turner is the driver that's found himself facing the wrong direction of turn
Ironic,
1.
isn't it?
It is just a little bit, and he has indeed found himself turning it around. And it's not an easy place to find yourself rejoining the circuit, because the cars come around a very blind corner. As you can see, another battle happening down the back straight right now. And this is what we're talking about. If you're going to make a pass anywhere around this circuit, this is one of the better opportunities to do it. As Matthew Doust goes very late on the brakes, a little too late, locks the rear, is lucky to pull it up. But here comes the 16 car. How about 3 wide? Ellis gets absolutely shoved out of the way. He has to back out of that as Thomas Pontonen continues the fight for this spot. Has to give it up though, and Matthew Doust very bravely and very aggressively does get the spot, but for how much longer? Because Thomas behind, looking very racy. You can see him moving under brakes there, just sizing up his opponent in the 21 car, of course, sponsored by Bow Repairs, the Redback Racing team. So we'll see if they need any repair bills after this battle, because it is getting very feisty, very quick indeed. And Pontonen definitely the aggressor of this battle, as we see Dylan Burst now getting very, very aggressive against the driver of Andrew Gilliam still. And how about around the outside this time? Burst is beginning to get a little bit desperate, and he knows that if he's going to make a pass happen, it has to be right here, right now into turn number 2. He's got the inside, but the grip isn't quite there on corner exit, which gives Gilliam the incentive to just hang tough on the outside, because look what he then receives as his reward. He gets the inside for turn number 4, a tight line taken in. Can Dylan Burst get the exit out?
Yeah, always a struggle. And right here, starting lap 4, the tyres are getting into their optimal window. Everyone in the top 10 setting personal best laps that time around. Still not quite enough to get Andrew Gilliam out of hot water, because Burst looks all the way around the outside at the hairpin. Doesn't find grip out there.
No, it's a very tough place to go around the outside. It is a little bit cambered there, but not enough to really make that outside line work as much as you'd like. But Dylan Burst, clearly the stronger of the two at the moment, and he is getting held up. But I've got to say, it might be just about race done in terms of the race victory for Dylan Burst today. The margin that first and second have now out, well, between second and third, it is some 4.5 seconds. So these two have really pulled away, but at the same time, Francisco Manuel Silva is not letting Matthias go. These two are still fairly close as well, so we have a battle for the race win, even if it is only a 2-horse race.
Yeah, exactly. Second place was fractionally faster on the last lap, near enough identical times between them. Maybe for a lap, you're happy to ride along there, but not forever.
No, not at all. Eventually, you do have to strike while the iron is hot, because like you said, if you're going to be behind a car for quite some time, the tires will go off. They're in their optimal range right now, but optimal means that it's only going to last for so long, and there is going to be a drop-off eventually. And if you're behind another car very closely, those drop-offs are going to come a lot sooner rather than later. Dylan trying to get the exit now, still on Andrew Gilliam, but I think too far back this time around. and the same goes for your race leaders as well. So not too much is happening in terms of your leaders at the moment, as the mid-pack has sort of settled down a bit as well. So this is the phase of the race where everyone's just kind of looking after themselves. 19 laps, it might sound like a sprint race, but in many ways, it's a race where you have to be flat out from start to finish. But at the same time, if you can look after your tires better than the other drivers around you, that is still going to pay dividends at the end of the race.
Yeah, especially track temperatures as they are, the possibility of just frying off the best of the tires and sliding around, struggling a bit in the last 5 laps is all too real for these guys. And in a battle like this here, well, if you can have that little bit more grip right at the end, that's when you might be able to strike.
Shamir Aizan Mod Hanapa has just gone for a big moment there on the exit of the double left-hander, gone for a bit of a bump into the tyre wall as well. These Porsches can take a bit of give and shove, so he may not be too bad, but what we might do is get a Motum simulation replay up on screen, and you'll see through the double left in a few moments' time. I don't particularly know what he did, whether he lit up the tyres or if it was just clipping the grass on exit, but we are about to find our answer as he makes his way through this really tight right-hander, and you need a lot of steering lock through there. It's not an easy corner at all, and then you flick it in for this double left-hander, and it's the second of these 2 corners where things go a little bit out of shape here. You can see he misses the apex slightly. He got the rear right tire into the grass, and around she went, and that's one of the tricky things with this car, David, because of course the engine in these cars is at the rear, so if you get a snap of oversteer, you've got so much momentum going towards the rear of the car to spin you around.
Yeah, that really is the key to these cars, is the weight distribution is unconventional. Porsche would say traditional in these cars. A lot of the weight on the rear wheels and indeed behind the rear wheels. You know as well as I, once they get far enough around, there is just no saving it. There is no amount of lock that will snap the car back the other way. It's a pendulum effect.
It absolutely is, and at the moment the pendulum is still swinging in the favor of Dylan, but it's been 5.5 laps now, almost going to complete his 6th tour of the circuit behind Andrew Gilliam. Still no way through. These two are neck and neck, and for your race leaders as well, they're still just keeping tabs on one another, still lapping to within 100th of a second of those two, but this battle for 3rd and 4th is definitely the closer of the two. As we take a look at Brodie Sentence at the moment, and look at the battle pack he finds himself in at the moment for, I believe, position number 17 at the moment, maybe 16, sorry. And of course, he's behind Shamir, who just had that incident, so his tires will still be recovering. They'll be pretty hot, and if Brodie's going to make any inroads, now's a very good time while Shamir is just recovering his tires.
Yeah, it becomes a slippery slope, doesn't it? You go for a spin, you put a bit too much heat into the tires, they're a bit slippery, and then every subsequent corner you're squirming around, maybe sliding them a bit more, and you really need to focus, get ahead of the game to let the tires cool off and not overdrive them. You've really got to put your focus on that.
Absolutely. You can see Brodie is getting very aggressive, almost gave Shamir a bit of a touch. I think he outbroke himself. And I tell you what, Fred Montero behind may be able to have a little bit of a look. Doesn't quite get the exit he would have liked, though. But these guys are really scrapping hard at the moment for these sort of mid-pack positions in 16th place. Just as well, we have had a couple of retirements as Fred Montero. How late on the brakes do you like a touch to the Fanatec podium-sponsored car? Lucky not to spin them all the way around. But Brodie Sentence, great car control, does hold on as we continue to look at our battle out the front of the field at the moment. And we apologize for the fastest lap timing screen in the top right. They are now, the lap times have dropped off just a little bit, now into the 0.4, so sort of the mid-30s range at the moment, as Matthias Burke is becoming under increasing pressure from Francisco Manuel Silva here, and into the gravel as well goes our race leader. So this is hotting up very quickly, and this is sort of the part of the race where maybe a difference in setups, maybe a difference in driving technique has provided the opportunity for Francisco to be maybe not as strong in the opening phase, but in the middle and late phase of the race, he's actually beginning to come into his own.
Yeah, I imagine a pointy setup would come really quick out of the box and then start to eat away at the rear tires, potentially start to become a little bit more of a handful to manage. First and second are no longer getting away from 3rd and 4th. In that 3rd and 4th battle, Burse did grab Gilliam for 3rd place. Is that going to release him? Is he's got enough time to catch 1st and 2nd? if Manuel Silva is going to go for some moves here, as he's alluding that he might just do so, that could help Burst catch this lead pack if they're going to start going side by side, start battling, start having to defend in this race for the lead.
Absolutely, Dylan Burst got past Andrew Gilliam on that last lap, so this lap actually will be an entirely clean lap for him in fresh air, and in doing so, he's actually managed to gap Andrew Gilliam quite significantly as well, so Dylan definitely got some pace in the Vendaval sim racing car. It's going to be his first lap across the start-finish line, and we'll get our first glimpse at what kind of lap time he has in the number 1 car, the highest I-rated driver on the field, a 30.4. Match that, that's 0.3 of a second faster than first and second, who I'd just like to point out were separated last lap around 1,000th of a second.
Yeah, they've gone and fallen about 0.6 off their best pace. Meanwhile, that was a personal best for Dylan Burst. He really was held up for a bit behind Gilliam there. Goes to show how important that 2-lap qualifying was. He's got that kind of race pace, but for the first third of the race, couldn't use it, while first and second here were getting away, building a bit of margin.
Absolutely. The gap for Dylan Burst between himself and pole position was 0.9 of a second, so maybe the qualifying setup not quite there for him, or perhaps just didn't quite get the lap together as he would have liked. But as we've seen in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Supercup, which all of these drivers are hoping to qualify for at the end of the 5-round series that we are now starting our first edition of course, we see the qualifying in that series is often separated by a half a second over an entire 30 cars. So for these drivers, this is a great warm-up for them to really learn in a pressured environment to make sure you perform under pressure in qualifying, but on race starts, in battles, in race pace as well when you're all by yourself. This really is a warm-up series for what's to come for these drivers.
Pretty sure one of the ad lines for Tag Heuer is "don't crack under pressure," and they write that next to a lot of their athletes. So if you want one of those Tag Heuers, don't crack under pressure. That's certainly the message for all these drivers. There's some battles still putting the pressure on drivers in our top 10. Battle for the lead, still hot, 7th and 8th. Clint Shane Smith, CS Esports, might come under some pressure.
Absolutely, Nicholas Skeets at the moment in car number 10, but stands in position number 8. Is doing a very good job at the moment, was marginally faster than Clint last lap around. And Clint's become a driver that's really begun to experiment in quite a lot of different classes. He often used to drive the V8 Supercar almost exclusively, and then he sort of faded away from driving for a little bit and really focused on his Clint Smith events that he did for so long. We've had a couple of them covered on SimSpeed TV here as well, but now he's really focusing on his driving in a number of cars. You see him more in GT3s, you see him in the Porsches, you still see him in the V8s and doing very well there as well. So Clint really diversified as a driver, and trying to qualify for the Porsche Esports Supercup is definitely going a long way for him as a diversity driver, and someone that can really be a wheelman and drive anything they want and be fast in it right from the get-go. They're doing a very good job at the moment in 7th place. But Nicholas Skeets definitely got quite a bit of pace in himself and is just slowly edging onto the back of Clint.
Interestingly, I'll say both of these guys had a pretty horrible standing start. They were 5th and 6th on the grid. Both of them a bad getaway, and the 2 cars behind went clean around the outside, swallowed up both of these drivers. So also the standing start was a struggle point for them too.
And these cars are very difficult to start as well. There's a couple of easy ways to start the car where it's almost a risk-free option in many ways, but it's not the fastest option. And all these drivers know how valuable the starts are, because in many respects, these aren't the easiest cars to make an overtake happen in. They are actually quite a bit of a struggle at times. With the amount of error they have, meaning you can't really carry the corner speeds in some places. The braking is very, very good, but also getting a run on the other driver in front is hard as well. Due to the rear engine nature, they put the power down quite easily, so all the drivers often aren't making massive mistakes on corner exits. They are hard to pass. But if you can manage to get a very good start, that is easy positions right from the get-go. Francisco Manuel Silva still applying pressure to the back of your race leader, who I have to say, if we're going along the Tag Heuer catchphrase, he is not cracking under pressure right now. He's had the blowtorch applied to the back of his car for some laps now and doing very well indeed. And for both these drivers, I'll be completely honest, I'm not super familiar with either of their backgrounds, but by all means, they are doing a fantastic job at the moment and proving they've definitely got a very extreme level of pace.
Yeah, and Francisco Manuel Silva representing Club Africa/South Africa, and there's quite a few drivers emerging on the sports car scene from that part of the world now, making a very, very strong name. I think Jordan Pepper, for example, Bathurst 12-hour winner, and then of course you've got, who are the brothers? Oh my goodness, the Van der Linders, Sheldon and the other one. Factory drivers for Audi. So some very strong drivers from that part of the world making a statement in global sports car racing. And this is a statement for the lead underneath 0.2 of a second.
Absolutely, and they're still continuing to fight. I've got to say, there's still a couple of countries I'm surprised we don't see more often on iRacing. India is definitely one that strikes the mind. I know they've got a massive motorsports fan base over in India, so it's surprised not to see too many of them over here on iRacing.com. But of course, iRacing is growing at an exponential rate at the moment. It's going from strength to strength. So I'm sure in many time, well, in a not too distant future, we might see more drivers jumping in from all over the world. But that was one of our first glimpses of a little area there from Matthias. It wasn't big enough to really make anything happen for Francisco behind, but it was just a little bit of an opening. It was just a bit of a motivation there for Francisco to say, hey, I might be leading, but I'm not bulletproof. And he didn't make the apex either through that final corner. So at the moment, we've gone from Matthias being really strong and not cracking at all, just to making just little mistakes. And sometimes if you're not really in tune with what you're doing, you're not fully mentally in the game at the moment, those little mistakes, they can weigh on your mind. And you think, oh, bugger, I missed that one corner. And then you miss another one. And then you get an oversteer moment out of turn number 2 for the driver, Matthias Burke. It just weighs on your mind, and eventually it compounds into a major mistake that costs you many positions. And I'm just beginning to see Matthias overrun a few corners and overdrive as we head to just 6.5 laps to go. Is this the point where Francisco was looking his strongest to make a pass?
At some point, if they're this close, you'll imagine a Hail Mary in the final lap or the penultimate lap from Francisco Manuel Silva there. It'll cross his mind, but he's not willing to do it just yet because they're still walking away from and keeping Dylan Burse in check back in 3rd place. If he just waits another lap after that, then it really will be just a 2-horse race, and he can try to spring a surprise somewhere that Matthias Burke might not be expecting and able to defend.
Absolutely, and of course, the later you make your move in the race, the less time there is for the car you've just overtaken to respond and get the pass back done and find their way back into what was their respective position. If you are just wondering about the pace of 3rd place, he has been putting in some very good lap times, has Dylan Burse, but sadly not able to make the inroads he would have liked. But he has gapped Andrew Gilliam, who is just looking a little bit unsettled in a few different areas, so maybe a bit of work on tyre conservation needed for Andrew Gilliam, because we know how talented he is and what he is capable of. As we go back to look at our race leaders still through turns 1 and 2. A bit of a slide through turn number 1 for Francisco, but he holds it all together as he continues to pile on the pressure to Matthias as they work their way through turn number 4. And Francisco's getting a little bit braver on the brakes here. I've got to say, there's a few times I'm noticing him just a couple more meters at each little braking opportunity he can, just edging closer to the AXA car in front and looking to make a move. But I think he'll still continue to sit behind. But you can see just a little bit of jolts here. He's thinking about the left, thinking about the right, just applying the pressure and filling the mirrors and making sure that Matthias is fully aware of where the number 2 car is.
Yeah, that's some of the strongest intention we've seen, some of the most aggressive showing of the nose that he's had. He had a great run up the hill, and that's what he's been working on, I think, lap after lap, is what is the right line up the hill out of Atwood Curve to give me a very good run towards the hairpin.
So we are coming down to the final 5 laps of this race. The clock is ticking down for all our drivers as there's still plenty of battles raging on throughout the field. Another one that we sort of touched on before hasn't really materialized all too much is Brody Sentance and Fred Montero. Those two are still continuing to lap within a 1/10 of a second of each other each lap around, but are still stuck at a 1/2 second gap, not able to make inroads on one another. So those two scrapping away, and a couple of our drivers are fairly spread out throughout the field, but our race leaders are definitely still locked together for this lead as we go back and look at Andrea Nix and Clint Shane Smith for 10th and 11th at the moment. And is that
no
a bit of
problem.
is that a mistake there for Clint in the recent future or recent past?
He was 7th or 8th, wasn't he? And now he has dropped back to 11th. I
And
don't.
lap 11. Lap 11 was very, very slow for Clint Shane Smith, or 141 in comparison to the 132s he had been doing. So I'm just going to go back and scroll through the replay and see if I can find any little issue here for Clint Shane Smith. And actually, it was a solo incident for Clint through the tight hairpins towards the end of the lap. He just applied the throttle, picked it up a little too aggressively, a little too early, and the Porsche's grip, well, it said no.
Exactly. Of course, no traction control, no ABS. It's all by feel in this car, and with that unique weight distribution, you can get to full throttle kind of quickly, but you can't just slam it open. But it's very long braking distances, a lot of trail braking in this car, a lot of time spent on the brake pedal, even if just lightly, just feathering it to make the car rotate, get the car to sit where you want, so that you can then get on that throttle very quickly.
Absolutely, with all the weight in the back of these cars, and obviously when you're going through a corner, you want the weight on the front of the car, you want it squishing down on the front two tires, which are doing all the turning, of course, through a corner, and that's where you want the load of the car to be. But in a rear-engine car with all the weight at the rear, that's not going to happen. So a lot of time, like you said, spent on the brakes, just getting the nose of the car down to get the rotation and get the grip through the corner to really get these cars driving fast. You'll see all the pros, all the quick guys trail braking a long way into the corner there. You saw Matthias and Francisco both demonstrate that perfectly through turn number 4. But again, Francisco not able to make the inroads he'd like through turn number 4 to really punch his exits. This lap is not going to be the opportunity for him to get into the race lead unless he can be very creative in the final few sectors. But Matthias, we saw him just a few little mistakes in the middle phase of the race. He's sort of dialed that back a little bit now. He's hitting his marks again. That's exactly what he needs to do, because at the moment, Francisco is showing intent, but he's never really been able to go for a full attempt at the moment. So for the driver, Matthias Burke, he can really just hit his lines, focus on what he's doing, and unless Francisco goes for a very aggressive move or gets a brilliant Hail Mary move done, I think Matthias is in a very good spot here if he can just keep doing what he's doing.
Exactly, and we saw on the onboard there that the fastest section of the track, you only just get up into 6th gear. The straights aren't particularly long here, and that's why, well, probably one of the reasons Formula 1 didn't stay. For higher speed cars, it's tough to have a good race here. It works great for club level stuff. It's an exciting and interesting track, and it's free iRacing based content, which also helps with its popularity on the sim. But for long slipstreaming down a straight, this track doesn't have that. So you've got to be close and get a very good run if you're even going to give yourself an opportunity at trying to outbrake someone.
Absolutely. When it comes to cars or outbraking another car, these are one of the better options. They do have some exceptionally long braking zones, but getting that run, getting the traction and the run on the other driver in front to even go for that late braking maneuver is oh so difficult. We're working lap 17. We're halfway through it of 19 laps. So the clock is ticking and the sand is almost running out of the timer as well for Francisco Manuel Silva to make a move on the AXA car. Beautiful livery, I've got to say. I do quite like the blue accents on that. And then for Francisco, I'm going to be honest, the chrome's a little much. It's a very aggressive, but you can't say no to a Porsche with martini stripes.
Bo needs to disclose about his relationship with iLiveries, I think, here, when you give an opinion like that.
I am a little bit biased towards iLiveries. They do some fantastic work. The AXA car does look beautiful. It's not my favorite iLiveries work. I much prefer a bit of orange, a bit of blue, and a bit of a white base as well. I'm not describing any team in particular, but they do some fantastic work as well. And the Martini Porsche behind also a very striking livery as well. And it's one car you're not going to miss on the track by any means, as they work their way through on the second last lap now. So for Francisco, he's got to be thinking about a move soon, surely.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, he was getting close, thinking about having some moves earlier. By the time you get to this lap or the final lap, either give it a shot or, finish second wandering. So this isn't the closest he's ever been, but you'd imagine just something gutsy has got to be brewing in the back of his mind.
Absolutely, and you can see they're a little bit wider than you would like, isn't that, Matthias, through that right-hander? And you can see Francisco, you can see he is getting a bit creative now. He is getting a little bit aggressive and feisty as well. And he is thinking about a move. He just saw the steering inputs there. There was a train of thought for just a moment there about going for the crossover, get the inside for the second of the two right-handers. How about the inside of the right-handed hairpin as well? It's all getting a little bit dramatic now because we have 2 corners left in this lap before the white flag is thrown. And I'm talking about the final lap, not the surrendering flag, because neither of these drivers are going to back down. One of our drivers slips on out of the way. That's Matthew Grousseau, who gets out of the way of first and second with 1 lap to go. 130.9 for your race leader, 131.0 for Francisco. So he has to respond on this lap, but Matthias is doing a fantastic job through the opening sector of this lap. Wind the power on through the long left-hander and then wind your way through a series of relatively insignificant kinks. And then for Francisco, he's got to be close here, but that's a distance. There is a gap between the 2 cars. And unless there is a major error from Matthias on corner exit, I don't think it's going to happen to the hairpin corner. He's going to be in the slipstream. The wind direction goes west here at the Okayama circuit, but the wind speeds are very low at 3 kilometers an hour. So the slipstream effect is not going to be all that dramatic. So for Francisco, he's running out of time. He's running out of corners and opportunities to make a move happen. Matthias has the line covered through the double left. It's only 2 hairpins and 2 right-handed corners to go. Applies the power beautifully, and Francisco not able to get a run. Late on the brakes, thinks about the inside, can't do anything with it. Matthias still holds the advantage. Francisco, again, he's closing, but there's no more opportunities unless it's very aggressive, very bold into the final corner. He carries the speed, but he's not got the place. And through the final corner for the 19th time of 19 attempts, it is going to be Matthias Burke taking victory in the first of our broadcasted strength of field races here at the Okayama International Circuit. A brilliant duel between himself and Francisco Manuel Silva. A great effort there. Dylan Burse comes home in position number 3 for Vendaval Sim Racing, with Andrew Gilliam smoking him up in position number 4. Steve Hosey, a great effort there in position number 5 as the rest of our drivers come across the line, David.
Yeah, couldn't help but notice a little bit of damage actually on the front for Andrew Gilliam, and I wonder if that, precisely when that happened, and if that stopped him from keeping up the fight with Dylan Burst. But a fair fight between first and second was exactly what we wanted to see. It's exactly what we've got, and it didn't look like either of those drivers were disappointed with the result and with their race. So there's a couple more little scraps coming towards the end, and we'll see if any of them make any change, but I'm not expecting to see any Hail Marys out of 15th place.
Nah, it doesn't look like it. I think for the most part, a few of our drivers coming across the line are fairly single file. And I think the last of those drivers to come across the line on the lead lap will be Scott Turner, who found himself turning it around at turn number 1 a lot earlier in the race. Sadly, wasn't able to recover too much from it, but are still plenty of rounds to go. And for these drivers, it's worth remembering, these aren't the points that go towards the championship. This is to book yourself a ticket into the Super Session, and that is where your points are. And if there's anyone who's taking home a big haul of points to go towards that Super Session, it is your race winner. Matthias Burke takes the win in 28 minutes and 46 seconds ahead of Francisco Manuel Silva and Dylan Burse, who rounds out the podium. Andrew Gilliam in 4th with Steve Hosey, a brilliant position number 5. Adam Williamson in position number 6. Nicholas Skeets in 7th place after his battle with Clint Shane Smith. Thomas Pontonen in 8th. Matthew Doost in position number 9. And Andrew Nix in the top 10.
Yep. 11th place, falling a little bit backwards from his qualifying position. Clint Shane Smith finishes there just outside the top 10. Michael Teliancic a bit further behind him in 12th. Jonathan Durandel in 13th. 14th for Shamir Eisen, Maud Hanapaya, and your biggest mover in the race, Brody Sentence, from the very back of the grid and 29th, finishes in 15th with a clean race, just a minute behind the leaders. Adrian Duke in 16th, David Bosga in 17th, Colin Hill in 18th. Fred Montero, quite a bit of damage for the Frenchman on his car, means he ends up finishing in 19th. It was 20th for Lewis Gaspar.
in position number 21. It goes to Maurice Henry with a great effort there, staying on the lead lap with Jeremy Civic and Scott Turner on the lead lap as well. Matthew Grousseau, we saw him move aside for your race leaders on the final lap of the race in position 24. And Lewis Williams is your top 25. Alas Danda was the last of our drivers to be classified in position 26, with sadly DNFs including Robert Plumley, Tommy Tukkanen, Enzo Hikita, and Peter Johansson, your 30 cars at the end of a 19-lap race. It was a busy race. It was a dramatic race as well. And for these drivers, they are just looking to bank points as we look forward to the next round coming up in just a few weeks' time. But an interesting opening part of the series, David, and I think an interesting start to the campaign for many drivers as well, with a lot to reflect on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we learned about who's fast out of the box, who's fast later in the stint, especially when the track is as hot as it was today. Okayama, not an easy track to pass at, so it's great that it was pretty much all clean within our top 10. The drivers picking up the big points are drivers who really deserved it, raced clean and raced well.
Absolutely. We'll see, and hopefully we'll see this continue all the way through the 5-round Porsche iRacing Cup Championship, where qualification for the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Supercup will be held for your top 20 drivers. On behalf of David Haynes for co-commentating with me today, and also our director as well, Mr. Scott Fountain, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
This is fantastic. This is GT Racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got rid of the outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my god! Oh, big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Section's very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?